So, as the person who's responsible for content creation, what do you look for in a story before you accept it?
So, I do a lot of, I head acquisitions for MX, and I do a lot of content which is already, made.
Mm.
And at some points, yes, we do look at some stories. Essentially, for example, Ashram was made by our original content team. But in terms of a lot of the other content that we do, we look for, I personally look for relevance and stickiness.
Mhm.
When you see content, who you're buying it for. So what I look for today for the MX audience will be different from what I look for, let's say, if I'm in another company tomorrow or another audience.
Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing to it and hit the bell icon so that you never miss an update. Our episodes go live at 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. every day. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted and privileged to welcome a very, very senior person from the OTT world, from the media world, Mansi Srivastav. Mansi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Thank you for the kind introduction.
Thank you. Mansi is the Senior VP of MX Player. She was earlier with AQT Network, Movies Now, Romedy Now, ENTV, Zoom, and others. So, Mansi, let's talk about MX Player and OTT. Tell me about the kind of things that you do on the MX Player platform, other than videos.
Other than videos, yeah. So MX Player, it was actually interestingly just an app, an offline app, which was being used in India way before we went live in the current form of MX Player, and it was
Mhm.
like a VLC or a Windows Media Player. You used to use it just to watch videos that were
Mm,
cycled. And about 3 years back, we realized that okay, there is an app here, and there is a audience base which is massive. It's captive, and
mm,
they're using the app, and they're watching content on this. So it's been a unique history in that sense compared to most other all other OTTs, which sort of have the content first, then go live, and then there is an acquisition model for
mm,
users. You develop users and you enhance and grow your customer base. With
mm,
us, we had the reverse because we had all of the users; they were sitting there, and we then had to provide the content. So it's been an offline app generally, and now we've converted majority of our users to online. And other than video, we do actually have a lot of other components that
mhm,
are pretty strong and significant. And one of them being gaming. There's esports. We do have a music app which is integrated
mhm,
within this current platform. And we also have our latest, Takatak, which is a short form video app, which has users, influencers, UGC essentially, created across various languages, various
mm,
genres. It's pretty diverse, and video being, of course, still the mother main, function.
yeah, yeah. And
Um,
again, for our viewers and listeners, two of the very popular ones that I just watched on MX Player, one was Ashram and the other was Bisat.
that's right.
Both outstanding shows.
Yeah,
So,
you've seen the latest one, and Ashram was, of course, very massive.
yes, yes.
Bisat is just a very recent one, but yeah.
I've seen. I always look for episodes on MX Player.
Right.
Once in 10, 12 days to see everything new is coming out. So,
Yeah.
Mansi, tell me, how are OTT platforms changing the film and television business?
I think the change started off in a subtle manner. When it started off, some years back, I remember thinking about, how there's a requirement for great, strong, connections in terms of bandwidth, Wi-Fi, internet, etc., because this entire model is dependent on that. And it's been rapid. It started off in a subtle manner, and it, sort of it has gone in terms of growth. It's gone unparalleled, unprecedented in that sense, and unexpected because of the various connectivity options that are there now across the country. Film and television, I think, are here to stay for a long time, but I think OTT has sort of been a great platform or a great sort of a business model to have in a time like this, where for two reasons. I think
Mm,
both film and television have their own limitations. All businesses do, but in terms of
mm,
television, of course, there is you're viewing for the entire family. You're viewing not specifically at your beck and call in terms of when you're free. And I think the freedom that the OTT space provides to any user. So one is freedom that comes with it, and second is choice, because you have the ability to then not just look at fixed hours in a day. You have this entire universe and world that's presented to you in terms of content. So it's in that sense, in every possible way, in that sense, I guess a lot more diverse and offering a lot more than a television space can, because of its because of its infrastructure and limitations. Uh, Film, I think, is fantastic, and it's I personally am a big fan of the big screen and cinema and theater, and we've all grown up on that. So
Mm.
I wish, I mean, I like to believe that nothing will ever sort of take that space, and I don't think it will in eventually when things settle down.
Mm.
But I think we find ourselves in a time when film and theaters, etc., are all sort of have come into the effect and impact of everything that's been happening because of COVID and our pandemic, etc. So in that sense, you see a lot of that content now being pushed onto OTT, and that that's at least one way that you can reach out to the same number of people, if not more,
Mm.
um, that you were trying to do in terms of a big screen. So I think it's got a great combination of the diversity of all the content that's possible, languages, etc., and at the same time it borrows from various mediums and puts all of that together, and then you have literally this massive treasure chest of content in that sense, which is so customized to you as an individual.
Fascinating. So, as the person who's responsible for content creation, what do you look for in a story before you accept it?
So, I do a lot of, I head acquisitions for MX, and I do a lot of content which is already, made. And at some points, yes, we do look at some stories. Essentially, for example, Ashram was made by our original content team. But in terms of a lot of the other content that we do, we look for, I personally look for relevance and stickiness.
Mhm.
When you see content, who you're buying it for. So what I look for today for the MX audience will be different from what I look for, let's say, if I'm in another company tomorrow or another audience. So I think any acquisition person or content person looks for any story or piece of content with a very acute lens. You're looking for it not because you like it. You're looking for it because that 70 million people that are on your platform may or may not like it. So that's the lens that I see. And so often I see things and it's tempting, to kind of go for something, and then you realize, no, this is what I like, but this isn't my audience.
Mm.
So what I look for, therefore, is the relevance and match with the right fit with the audience that we have. And what they currently like is, I mean, it's interesting because it's, a lot of, we have a lot of male audiences. They like a lot of stories which are, there's crime, there's thriller, there's drama. Essentially, I think, stories that are engaging, interesting, and, the one thing that is there is stories that are not sort of very slow as at least when they open up, when they start. And I think everyone leads busy lives, and
Mm.
entertainment, OTT, MX, where it becomes an escape. You want to kind of, jump into something, and the unfolding of that. If it takes too long, I see a bit of a impatient behavior there. So I think I look for that as well in terms of how it's unfolding. Stories wise, I mean, we look for very diverse stories. Right now, we're actually looking at content from all over the world.
Mhm.
We're doing content, so it's also an audience that's lapping up a lot of different kinds of stories. It's not just Indian content. We're doing Turkish and Korean, Chinese, Ukrainian. So at the end of the day, I think a good story from any part of the world, I see that working and resonating as long as it's in the right language.
Mm. And I was also looking at your platform and I was surprised. Obviously, people are now willing to accept multiple languages which are dubbed.
Yes, yeah. It's in fact dubbed content.
Mm.
We started off with dubs being just within our country. We used to take movies from the south, dub them, and show them in Hindi languages. And then we started doing that with shows, and we started seeing traction from Tamil to Hindi, Telugu to Hindi, vice versa. And like I mentioned, now it's universal. Stories from any part of the world. Of course, I mean, it's tougher to translate certain things if they're completely set in a
Mhm.
sort of a culture which is very alien. But I think more and more the world is becoming smaller, and stories are conveying emotions that are universal,
Mm.
relationships or struggles or challenges, and those bring people together no matter where the story is coming from.
Mm.
So you see that sort of working very well, and dubs therefore play the most massive role, because at the end of the day, you're still being able to hear something in your language, and you're relating to some story in another part of the world. But, human lives in that sense are pretty sort of connected with the kinds of things that are challenges that are being faced, where they do connect with emotions, relationships, cultural things to a great extent as well.
So, my next question to you is that from the time you take a decision to acquire a series
Yeah.
or a story, how much time does it take to be able to launch it?
From the time that we acquire, I would say it would depend on, of course, we have legalities and you look at paperwork and that always takes time. But I would say a minimum a month, maximum, I think within 4 to 6 months, we try and make sure that it's out there, because you don't want to, delay it beyond a certain point. But at least a month is needed. You want to prep for it. We also have, a lot of communication that we put out there in terms of marketing, in terms of getting, the content familiar. And there is a lot of choice as well, that's there with the audiences. So you got to do your work.
Yeah.
It's not just about the acquisition of the content itself, all of the support that you want to make out there and break through the clutter wherever possible to communicate that this is coming out. So that needs at least a month, if not more.
Interesting. So, a follow-up question is that, what are your thoughts on so much competition in the OTT platforms?
Yeah, I think for now, and I think any emerging markets and early stages, which is what I think we're still at, and I mean we've begun a few years back. Competition is great. It's healthy. I think it keeps us all on our toes. You're not compromising. There is no monopoly where you're sort of fooling an audience and just providing substandard product. I think it keeps the quality high, because you're constantly trying to make things better. Not that an individual solo player or two wouldn't do that, but I think the natural instinct then is a lot more. It's sharper, when there's so much competition. Do I think it'll last? Probably not. I think eventually too many players in a market always end up sort of consolidating at some point. There would be buyouts, there would be some sort of coming together, collaborations. But this stage is good as is, because it's still an early stage, and there's a lot of content and a lot of writing that's never been seen before in this country, stories that are new. All of that wouldn't be happening if we didn't have so many players. So I think it's a great thing that it's there right now.
That is so true. So my next question is that there is a lot of noise about regulating OTT platforms.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your perspective on this.
It's interesting, because regulation has been part of our culture and territory, and a lot stronger maybe than many others, since decades. And I remember the exact same cycle and stage that we had when television came about. There was an openness, and then at some point there was a recognition of the fact that there needs to be some sort of a governance here. And it happened, and we're back to the same similar stage again in OTT right now. I think OTT is probably more sensitive to it, because the power of being able to speak to any individual customized directly. I today can see something in my version because I've made a choice. It will offer choices to me specifically because Mansi wants to see this. It gives you bigger freedom, and therefore you want to do more as a content provider. You want to provide better things. I think it's a balance. I do believe that a certain sensitivity is probably important, in spite of everything being customized, and that is it an adult watching, or is it a child watching, is it which ethnic group, etc. There may be sensitivities there. So I think that certain limited amount is probably good. But I think that's where it's a tightrope, and it's a fine balance. I think it's very easy to err on the side of being wrong over there, because I think you tend to overdo it, and perspectives can be gray. They can be they can be sort of debatable. And in that sense, I think it's a tricky thing. It needs to be really sort of done in a manner which doesn't kill the entire new model, new business. And it's not just about the business. It does the fact that people do want to watch interesting content and diverse content. So to bring them back to the same, sort of limited, closed environment where, they're then again pirating content and watching things from the other side of the world because they're not getting interesting enough stories here, would be a disservice to our own business, to our own country. So yeah, I think a limited amount of it is healthy. Again, it's good, but I do believe that we tend to overdo, SMP and regulation. I hope that it gets controlled.
We're seeing a lot of senior stars from Bollywood are now beginning to come onto the OTT platforms. And, some really outstanding shows are coming. I wanted your views. Is this trend likely to continue or will it stop after the pandemic?
No, I think it's likely to continue.
Uh-huh.
Certainly likely to continue. I think it began way before the pandemic, if I have to sort of really put a date on it. And you would have first, at least recall wise, I remember Kevin Spacey in a House of Cards. I think it would have begun in some other part maybe, but I think acting or actors, want to do different things. And beyond a film, there is a world here which is offering, again, a whole new diverse range of stories. There is no logical reason to not do it. And I think actors that want to do, sort of greater roles and more complex stories would recognize that and are recognizing that and seeing that. So I think it's symbiotic in nature. Audiences want to see these actors, beyond the film world as well, and web shows or digital series in that sense are huge in consumption. They're the bread and butter in that sense right now in terms of the number and volumes of minutes that are getting consumed just in that format. And it's a great thing that actors are also recognizing the sort of vastness of this and the potential and depth of this, because like I said, there is no reason to not do it. The only thing is, yes, of course, mostly the film world has a certain kind of commercial, value, which the web space is not yet in. So that always becomes a balancing rope, even for OTTs, when you want to get a big star onto the platform. But I think with stories being strong, with a strong director, writer, etc., you do draw audiences as well as talent. Which would want to be a part of that project. And I think that's just going to be more and more, not less.
Interesting. So let me now move to another section of our conversation. For someone who handles such amazing content and keep bringing it out, repeatedly to the audience, my question to you is: what are some of the core values you believe in?
In a very broad sense, I would say integrity. I think that travels across any domain, professional, personal. It's a core to me in my personal sort of way of operating as well. I do believe in that. And tenacity. I think that's something very personal to me. I'm not somebody who gives up very easily. I would, I would not sort of easily give up on something which is challenging or an endeavor which I'm trying to complete. So yeah, integrity and tenacity would be, of course, there are many things that inspire you to kind of constantly push and do things, but these two things are big in my sort of mind.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. So my next question is that from where you stand today, what does success mean to Mansi?
I often think about this because success in the traditional sense can mean so many things different to, it could be, in terms of careers or monetary or, recognition and, being rewarded, awarded. But I think success to me has a lot to do with balance and happiness. I think with the way I look at things, it's important to the well-being of an individual. To Mansi, since you asked, the well-being of an individual, which can be along with the growth. I think growth or any achievement without well-being, happiness, a personal balance is incomplete. It's almost hollow. I don't believe in that kind of growth, and I think it's not sustainable and it's not complete. So success to me, therefore, if I had to say just one word, would be balance.
Okay. And I've got time for two more questions for you. So my next question to you is that if you, Mansi, were a role model to millions of children who closely followed you and your life choices, what is the one thing you would change in yourself?
That's a very good question, Ashutosh. If I were a role model to millions of children, I'd say I would change my appetite of taking risk, like risk-taking appetite and boldness and confidence in that sense. Confidence, again, of course, I'm confident in the common sense of the word, but I mean confidence of a level where you're bold enough to make mistakes, do more things which could go wrong, to have the ability to walk away into the, sort of less traveled path or road. I would do that, because I think that at that age, and for children, I think the ability to do things without really thinking through, overthinking, and sort of being out there, going out on a limb, instead of being cautious. I am a cautious person by nature. I would do that. I would change that about myself. Take more risks, be more bold. Sort of put more things out there.
Terrific. And my last question to you, and this is a question on failure. I've often said that parents in India or South Asia don't teach children it's okay to fail. It's
Yeah.
always come first in class, go to the head of the line, etc. And yet we fail.
Yeah, yeah.
My question to you is, what have been some of your learnings from some of your mistakes?
Quite a few, actually. I maybe, and you're right about, the culture that we're in, and parents and failing. It's taken very seriously, and it's taken in a very different way. I think I was blessed in that sense to have a different sort of a support system with my failures. But two, three things. One, I've realized a failure feels like a failure only temporarily. And so many times you see that failure, and in hindsight, in retrospect, that failure seems to have given birth to something new. It seems to have been the key to a new door. It opens up something new. And then you look back and you realize that if you hadn't failed, you probably wouldn't have chosen the second option or the new path. So, at the point in time, the failure seems, like a catastrophe, or it seems enormous. I've learned that time really makes you see things, and the same failure could literally be your passport to a new universe. That's one thing. Second thing, I think there's this, again, I mean, our elders say it a lot, whatever happens for the best. I try and also sort of remember that, because with failures, that's the other thing I've realized, that, I guess a version of what I was saying earlier, that it ends up still being something that you've achieved in even if it's in a more roundabout way, or even if you don't see it immediately. One of my things I think I've learned, just as a aside, in terms of things, is from my mistakes, would be that to give things time. I think knee-jerk reactions, or thinking off the bat very quickly, sometimes has led to decisions or things which may not be ideal. I think that's one of the things that I've learned from my failures, that to give it rest, to give it time, to give it a pause. And sometimes just that time and pause brings about a solution, brings about a resolution that you wouldn't see otherwise. So that's something I've definitely learned from my
Fantastic.
mistakes. Yeah.
Mansi, thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for taking me through literally a 101 of the OTT platform and helping me understand so many nuances of it.
No, absolute pleasure chatting with you, Ashutosh.
Thank you.
So
And
much.
good luck and all the
Thank
best.
you. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.